All right. Commissioner Dunwoody,
Present.
Commissioner Simmons, Commissioner Davis Jr., Commissioner Marin. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Commissioner Donnelly. That's old. Commissioner Hollifield.
Present.
Commissioner Shire.
Here.
Commissioner Smith. Commissioner Jones Chance.
Very good. We have a quorum. Motion would be in order to excuse the absences of Commissioners Simmons and Davis Jr.
Support. So move.
Support.
Motion by Phil, support by Michelle. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to agenda approval. Any comments on the agenda for this evening's meeting?
I know this might be bizarre, but might we switch old and new business? I'm assuming this is our applicant.
No.
Oh, no. Oh, never mind.
No. Yeah.
Never mind. Then no comment.
No comment. Motion would be in order to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved. Support.
Motion by Amanda, support by Michelle. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Next up is public comment. This is the portion of the meeting set aside for general comment to the Planning Commission for any items for which there is not a public hearing this evening. Motion would be in order to open the public comment.
So move.
Motion by Phil, support by Michelle. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Joe, do we have anybody on Zoom? Very good. Anybody on joining virtually, if you want to raise your hand in Zoom, we will selectively unmute you for comment. Please just keep those comments limited to 3 minutes.
Can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
You said you can hear me or you cannot?
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Maurice Jordan, Second Baptist Church, Ypsilanti. Respectfully, Mr. Chairman, I'm imploring you and this body to please stop dragging this out because of the obfuscation of the main issue. You have given staff some meaningless tasks that are not relevant to the question that council put before you. According to the records, the city council requested this body to consider the maximum size, maximizing the size from 16 to 35 square feet for EMB, where EMB signs would be allowed. They never asked this body to review the digital percentage of the sign that was in the original text amendment. To date, I have not heard nor seen any empirical data in your minutes or elsewhere to support the opposition of a 35 square foot sign, which again is what council asked you to weigh in on. Yet you have directed the staff to look at digital percentages of signs in one meeting. And in the last meeting, you directed the staff to look at a 24 square foot size sign because it seemed reasonable as a reasonable compromise, I believe someone said. Again, this was not supported by any qualitative or quantitative data, as the sign guidebook suggests you should consider when determining the appropriate sign size. Now we have yet another delay because the staff claims they omitted sections from the public notice in the amendment that was approved back in March. It is my understanding, and I could be wrong, unless there was a petition filed, having another hearing would be out of order on this issue. If you read the sign guidebook that I shared with Josh, or even the pages 28 and 29 in your packet, you will see that this is not a one-size-fits-all solution. And the 35 square foot sign is considerably smaller than what is really required for the conditions on South Hamilton Street. I have to assume we all want EMB or any sign to be a benefit to the community, compatible with the built environment, our community values, but equally impart important information to our community. In that case, we must ensure that we do not enact an ordinance that causes unnecessary hardship, safety concerns out of ignorance or intransigence. I'll yield my time back to you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other hands for comment? Motion would be in order to close the public comment.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Michelle, support by Phil. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks for those comments. We'll get to those later as we address electronic message board size discussion in old business. First, we have committee reports. Dylan, anything you'd care to share with the commission on the non-motorized advisory committee?
Yes, thank you, Matt. Hello, everyone. For newer committee members, it's been a while since I've been here, so nice to talk to you all. I'm the chair for the Non-Motorized Advisory Committee, subcommittee of this commission. At our most recent meeting just last Thursday, we made a couple of changes to our bylaws, which we would like to have you all consider and approve. I've got copies here that I'll pass out. These are the existing bylaws as they currently read. Couple of grammatical changes in here as I was just going through. So you'll see that I've highlighted them. I'll pass these out. But then the main body is there's two large changes to bullet point number 2, section C and D. That was extra. So real quick, I'll just go through, as I mentioned, there's a couple of just like grammatical fixes, changing the word in to into, striking the word location. In section 2A, it reads, start of a meeting location in a handicap accessible location. That was just like a typo. Another example down in section 4, it says an annual report to cover an annual report ever January. So just correcting that to every. But the main thing is, so section 2C, initially and this was from the creation of the committee, states that we'll conduct our meetings under the Open Meetings Act of the state of Michigan. Not too long ago, the city council removed any burden of that for subcommittees like ours where there isn't staff available. We have our meetings without a staff. They're not like recorded. We're not kind of following Open Act rules. We're not expected to, and we couldn't really comply with them with all of the requirements in there for what we're doing. So we're just looking to like strike that from the bylaws. We've added language about clearly posting our annual calendar and having minutes and agendas posted as soon as practical and in a timely manner. That is something that we've been doing, and I think we can continue to do and should suffice for public record and all of that stuff. The second change after that, on section D, 2D, we've had a quorum consisting of a majority of members, but no less than 4. What we're looking for in addition, now that we're like sort of removing our Open Meeting Act restriction, is being able to hold our own hybrid meetings and have committee members who might otherwise not be able to make it to a meeting be able to like call in and still participate. And so what we wanted to do is change the quorum down to 3 members in attendance in person, still making sure that meetings are happening where there are people there, and if public wants to join, they can, but we'll have some sort of Zoom or call-in option for any other members who can be part of the full quorum, even if they're not in attendance, is the idea. So just a couple of changes there to sort of really bring the bylaws in compliance with how we're actually operating and would like to operate going forward, and then a couple of typo cleanups. Any questions?
None here. Procedurally, I think this is the first time I've seen a bylaws update from the non-motorized advisory.
Yeah, we actually did. You'll see in the current ones, they're updated from July 20th, 2022. That was the last time it happened. And that update was, I believe, the first time they'd been updated. At that point, our former chair, Bob Krasinski, I don't know if I'm saying that right. I never get his name right. I'm sorry. He was transferring out of that role, and we put some language in about like what that actual like sort of like how that works. So that was the last time, and the first time. This is just like number 2, and it's some cleanup.
Sure. The first time around and this time around, being a subcommittee of the Planning Commission, we need to be voting to approve the change.
Correct. Yes, that's my understanding is you'll need to
Just wanted to make sure I knew
actually,
what to expect here.
we're submitting this for your consideration. We have voted with a quorum. Everybody's on board with these changes from our committee. And we just need you to like accept those so that the city will update them for us.
Okay.
Yep.
The approval date at the top, July 11th, will be July 17th.
Oh, I guess that's true. That was when we voted on them in our
Okay.
meeting last week. Yep. I just put that date in, but yeah, correct. We'd have to correct the date for.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
For 2C,
Yes.
all regular meetings, is the inclusion of the word deliberations added to ensure that there's no ex parte communication among committee members now that you're
Yes.
fully compliant with Open Meetings Act?
Yeah, there was like some discussion about like what do we actually want to like say there, and certainly we'll if we have like an email thread or something like that, basically we want to leave like discussion of actual committee stuff to the meeting. So okay, if this is something we need to talk about, we'll take it to the committee meeting.
Great.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments on the proposed bylaw changes? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote for approval of the bylaw amendments. Joe, if you could.
Maren,
Aye. Or yes. How do you do it?
Oldfield,
Support usually.
Support.
Support.
Shire,
The motion was to approve the proposed bylaws.
actually, did anyone actually make that
I
motion?
was just about to ask.
I don't think anyone actually made
So
it.
moved.
Okay,
Support.
sorry.
Thanks. Motion by Michelle, support by Amanda for the record.
Do it again. Maren,
Support.
Holyfield,
Support.
Shire, Smith,
Support.
Dunwoody.
Support.
Wonderful. Thank you all for relieving us of that burden right there.
Thank you.
I'll be back next month, hopefully with just some updates on stuff that's in the pipeline, and we'll also probably need your rubber stamp and or like consideration for. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll look forward to it. Thanks. Okay, that brings us to presentations. With nothing on the agenda tonight, we'll move directly to old business. We have first the electronic message board size discussion. Joe, anything you want to share with the commission?
So there's a lot of information in the packet. Some was provided by some of the planning commission members. I believe Josh has also put together a memo and a PowerPoint, so I can go through that if that is the wishes of planning commission.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of material that we've seen, so kind of running through what is added here, I think would be useful.
I don't know exactly what was added versus what you've seen, versus what you haven't seen. So if you can help me out on what you haven't seen.
Yeah, the beginning of that is a memo from an earlier meeting, and so reviewing that memo, I don't think is necessarily helpful here. We did see the
So I think it's the presentation that it should be on the screen right now.
okay.
I don't think you've seen this one yet. Is that
Right.
correct? Or you have
This one's dated today.
it today, but
Oh, but it has old material in it.
it might. So this is
We did already see the review of like neighboring
neighboring
communities.
communities. Okay. Then we will keep going. You've all at least received the memo from our city attorney, correct?
Yes.
We got that prior, so essentially we can go into it, but I think it's pretty clear that how we utilize the REIT decision. And then I guess Josh is making a recommendation here. I don't know if you want to talk about that, or is this the same recommendation that you've already gotten? So that's
The recommendation, sorry, I'm just trying to make sure I can follow along to where you're at here
82.
in the packet. Thanks. There's a lot to cover here. So the recommendation here includes the note in section 122-442 of 24 square feet for maximum area. So that is, I think the other bounds of the recommendation match things we've seen previously, but the size specifically is new. Right, the previous recommendation, we talked about that being an existing 16 square foot maximum with 50% electronic message board area, if I'm remembering correctly. So in this case, we are keeping the percentage restriction, but increasing the overall maximum size.
Anything we didn't cover already? I know that that was kind of weird. Like I said, from what I've heard, you've talked about this a lot. And so,
Yeah, I think the only question, or I think the big question that we had coming out of the last meeting was one of the sign guidelines, the like state level sign guidelines that we heard from Maurice in the comment was provided to Josh. And that was, I think, one of the missions that we had set staff upon from the last meeting was tracking down copies of that as sort of an objective guideline. Because I think a lot of commissioners in the last meeting, not to speak for everybody, but myself included, were struggling to settle on what from these guidelines could serve as an objective measure for us to base a judgment. Does that ring a bell? Is that familiar? Is that something that Josh?
it's not,
Josh
it's not something I've talked to Josh about, but
okay.
But that's okay. I mean, a zoning ordinance is a very local thing, and so I don't know how. And this is where I'm coming at this. Like, I don't know how the state guidelines would actually matter when really a sign decision is one of the most local decisions you can make.
Sure.
Your opinion really weigh heavily.
Right.
Michelle's got given a lot of information, and so I don't know.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts. Well, the Michigan
Let's
Sign
hear 'em.
Guidebook, it offers a lot of like good guidelines based on data, which is what the Maurice was expressing that we should consider. And so if you look at table 5-1, what page of the PDF is that? Sorry, I scanned just the relevant pages, try to keep this packet as short as possible from the sign guidebook. But essentially it's saying, it indicates that a 78 square foot area could be suitable for a 25-mile-per-hour roadway. But then in 5-7, on that page, 5-7, it argues that illuminated signs can be read at a greater distance, so then a smaller area would be justified. And then page 5-6 says that signs lower to the ground can be even smaller to convey the same message. So it doesn't exactly give like clear guidelines that we could use, but we could integrate these together to sort of, I mean, I would make the conclusion that a 36 square foot sign area with 50 to 80% electronic message board coverage would make sense in the CN district based on the guidelines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm interested. I feel like we talked about the speeds on some of these streets in our past meeting, and I was kind of tending towards the 32 number that is suggested as the lower range of the 40-mile-per-hour signs in that table. But I don't know. I don't care to quibble on the difference between a 32 square foot sign and a 36 square foot sign. I'm indifferent on the distinction.
I also cruise around on Google Maps to look at the speed limits for the zoning districts to try to get an idea of the range, because we'd want to consider like the breadth of the areas that would be impacted. And in the CN, it varies among the CN SF, CN mid, and CN. Mm-hmm. Which would, for instance, in the CNSF, it's 25 miles across the board, but it goes up to 40 in the mid and then just the regular CN. So I'm wondering if one set of standards for the whole CN district makes sense. And I know we're like, people are very exasperated with this conversation, but I think it's very important that we put a lot of thought into this, because especially considering that we almost permitted these for residential use. So I think it's appropriate for us to go over this with a fine-tooth comb, even though it can feel exasperating to the public. I understand that. It's one of the fortunate parts about government.
Sure. Any thoughts from other commissioners on the proposed sign language?
Well, you know, I actually wanted it a little bit higher. for whatever reason, that I was given at that time. I think that, reading, Justice Thomas writings in the final sentence or two, where he says that we should err on the side of less rigid.
Mhm.
So that's more of where I'm at. I'm not trying to shrink it. I'd rather for it to be, a little bit higher. But I agree with the. Actually, I really didn't agree with the 24. I thought it should be higher. But
the comments about it being less rigid were very specific. Like, it specifically called out size as not being related to that comment. Right? Sorry, my packet's all over the place at this point, but like
The Gilbert decision?
yeah, it was specifically, what's that?
I think it's all content.
Right. So that's what I'm saying, is that I don't think that the Supreme Court decision is relevant to the size discussion. Is my point.
That's on the color and the pictures, I think, for the regulations that we were looking at.
And like, even that, like, I don't know if I personally agree with our lawyer. I'm not going to argue with our lawyer, but I don't see regulating color and pictures as being content. But
I think that's what he was saying.
He was saying it is.
That's what was confusing to me as well about how that sentence was worded.
So I disagreed with that because of the fact that I feel like then isn't animation content at the same time as the thing that and I feel very strongly that we shouldn't have animated signs because of driver distraction, which is the same reason I would choose not to have a bunch of colors on a sign also. However, my point right now is that I don't think that that leniency is relevant to the discussion about size specifically, and that we can definitely regulate that.
So the confusion is with the memo from the attorney, whether there is a suggestion that restricting the electronic message signs to text is content restrictive. I was of the opinion, and looking back at this now, that because there are multiple ways to communicate content through words or graphics, that the suggestion is that limiting signs to text is not a restriction of content. That was my understanding of the opinion there. Joe, were you a part of that discussion?
He said, sorry.
No, I'll just be very honest. Signs are one of the hardest things that we can do. The Supreme Court has handcuffed us in every which way that you possibly can, outside of size, and pretty much at this point. The sign discussion, I really appreciate what you're saying, Michelle, but it's one of those where some of these are actual policy decisions, and like, if you guys wanted us to text, like, that's more than fine. It's one of those where it comes down to your decision. And as far as staff is concerned, and Josh and I didn't fully have a really great detailed conversation before he jetted off over to Europe.
Sure.
But lucky him. But I think you can regulate things. You just cannot regulate the content, or as Mr. Barr says, the color. The pictures, but then what is a picture? And so that's where it does get confusing.
Right.
And like, similarly, when we're talking about the size and the, all of the other factors that are related to what we can regulate and should be regulating, I feel strongly that we should not be doing it specific to the case in front of us. And therefore, I would be in favor of going with some objective measure, like that the number that was in the table versus the number that was just suggested by public comment, only because it gives us an objective measure to say that that's how we're choosing, and not based on, because the case is a very specific type of content.
Yeah, and luckily I do think that those sizes are a little bit aligned now that we have that Michigan sign guidebook. So I am curious because you said something about kind of going through some of those regulations with a fine tooth comb. I think from our June meeting, um, you had fresh eyes on the sign regulations in a way that I don't think anybody on the planning commission in January of this year has fresh eyes for the sign regulation. Was there anything else that struck you from the proposed language as kind of warranting any further discussion?
Michael's on Zoom.
Oh,
The hand up.
Yeah. This commissioner.
welcome, Brian. I'm going to just note for the record that Brian joined us at 7:29. Some hearty sign discussion.
Did I miss the public comment?
Oh,
Yeah, we can unmute him if you don't mind.
awesome. Well, we did have a request to speak into the mics. And then Michael, I just promoted to a panelist. Michael, can you hear us? Michael, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, cool.
Was there anything on the discussion so far that you wanted to share your input for?
Well, it seems as if we're um um to me developing like a new ordinance or a section of an ordinance. And with that, first, do we not already have EMB signs? Don't we have it at like schools and like Shiloh Church and in those places? I
No.
think. Go
Well,
ahead.
there are places that have exceptions. It is Joe, maybe you know that better than I do.
Any school property is not subject to city zoning. And so that's why EMU has a lot of EMBs. And that's why schools are also allowed to have electronic message boards, because the city cannot regulate any of any school, because that is considered state property.
Well, then my only concern would be at this point, the signage location and the size, the manner, and the time. I think those are the things that perhaps we should concentrate on.
Yeah, and I guess so. We talked about the size a little bit, right? Because the location is governed by the freestanding sign standards generally, right? That is unimpacted by us, creating a carve out here for electronic message board signs. When we kind of open the floor to other input on size, I know we talked about avoiding rigidity in a few of those cases. It I haven't heard anything outside of the range of 32 square feet to 36 square feet, and it feels to me like that is a tight enough range that it's not worth. I don't know that we need to work to build any more consensus on that.
I don't
I
think
don't
so
want
either.
to. Okay. So I guess the question should be raised then. I said at the beginning of the meeting that we may have said everything there is to say about electronic message boards. Is there anything else to say before we make a motion on the proposed language?
We can't.
Oh,
It wasn't noticed with all the sections that would be impacted.
Yeah.
yeah, that's right. I
Subsections.
appreciate that.
Can
Yeah.
Joe,
Yes.
can you take me off your screen share, please?
You can see.
Yeah, just yeah. You're on section 122-665.
Oh, okay. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you. Now let me go.
Yeah, thanks for the reminder. So we can't vote. Joe, it's been a minute since I read that message. Can you share just for the record what the restriction is on our noticing this evening?
Oh, I did not
What the
know there was an
constraint
issue.
is?
I can help.
Okay, I didn't know there was an issue, so.
I should have been prepared for that, sorry.
The notice, I think it went out before Josh's time, I believe, the public notice for this. And it didn't reference all of the sections of the zoning ordinance that regulate signs. It only referenced the sections that were being considered to allow EMBs, but the tables will still say, just like billboards not permitted, it will say EMBs not permitted. So all the sections that regulate signs for every zoning district will be amended, but they weren't referenced in the public notice, so action can't be taken.
So the next course of action is to wait until next month's meeting.
Yeah.
I don't know that I see another way around that. Something to look forward to.
What I would say then in this conversation is 32 or 36, the will of planning commission. I can get a kind of nod, or you guys can just say it real quick, so that we can make sure we don't have to do amendments at the next read. So
Yeah.
That's the one thing that I think that really has changed. Right now we're at 24
Yes.
in the ordinance, and it sounds like we want to increase.
Yeah, we talked about 24 as a compromise. Some of the indications we've seen here suggest anywhere from 32 to 36. 36, I think, is in line with what council requested based on their discussion. And so given that we're talking about narrow margins there, my preference would be to just to stick with 36 so that we're not creating more work for us to try to get aligned with council on it. Does anybody disagree with that? Okay.
No.
36.
Then that'll be amended, and then it'll be noticed properly with all of the relevant sections at our next meeting.
Thank you.
And would that be still the 50% coverage? Just out of curiosity, what y'all are thinking?
Yes.
Cool. Figure we should discuss it now so we're not getting bogged down in it.
Yeah, and I guess I left our June meeting with the notion that there was more consensus on that.
Okay.
It's very aligned with all of the other communities.
Yeah.
There was like one.
I'm sorry, I cannot hear you guys.
Oh, sorry. I just
Thanks.
said that was the 50% was very aligned with all of the other communities except for one.
Chelsea.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those changes will be made. It'll be noticed, and it'll be brought back to planning commission for our.
Very good. Thank you. I think that concludes our business for electronic message board sign discussion. Under new business, we have 480 South Hamilton temporary sign permit. Joe, anything you want to share on that note?
It was in the packet. Obviously, this is pretty self-explanatory. We had a business off of Harriet that has moved. They have had their temporary sign permit renewed twice. Third time comes to you. Questions? It's a very detailed schematic of the sign in here.
Mm-hmm.
These are the majority of our permits that we
It
get.
looks like this.
Yeah, no, not that part. What was the rationale for the third?
Third one, it's a business moving. We want to make sure we support our businesses, and it's for 30 days. It's not a crazy amount. It's not extending it for a year. It's one.
That's what I thought. I mean, I'm familiar with the business
Mm-hmm.
and the location, so
Uh,
I get it.
Are they just having trouble getting a permanent sign
I
installed?
think they just want to let people know they moved to the back. Like,
Oh, I
they
see.
don't want to put a permanent sign there when really it's to get people.
Yeah, I see. It's just a banner sign.
Yeah.
It says approval for the third and final temporary sign permit. Is that because the ordinance does not? Gotcha.
I should have let you. The ordinance only allows for one additional extension.
Any other questions for staff? The first two iterations of this temporary sign haven't been a nuisance. I don't see any reason why we should restrict the third one. I don't know that there's a whole lot of discussion before we move to a motion.
I move to approve the renewal of the temporary sign for one final month.
Support.
We have a motion by Amanda and a support by Phil. Joe, can you give us a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Shire,
Approved.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones Chance,
Yes.
Commissioner Dunwoody,
Support.
Commissioner Marin,
Support.
Commissioner Holyfield.
Support.
We can have the quickest meeting in the history of planning commissions.
That was long.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We have a few more agenda items. We have public comment. That does bring us to the end of new business. The next item on the agenda is public comment. A motion would be in order to open the public comment.
Oh, move.
Move. Support.
Motion by Amanda, support by Phil. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. There is nobody left in the room. If there's anybody on Zoom that would care to comment, you can feel free to raise your hand and we will unmute you to share. Please limit any remarks to 3 minutes. Yeah.
Speak, Mr. Johnson.
Hello? Can you hear
Hello.
me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Just more of a question. I think I heard you all say that you could not move on this because of Josh's recommendation not to vote on this because they omitted some sections. I just want an answer if someone can tell me, did someone file a petition or a grievance or whatever you want to call it? It's called a petition in the record about this issue. If not, I would like to know why this is not out of order. Also, I think somebody suggested that this issue of a 35 square foot sign was accommodating Second Baptist in some way. But if you looked at table 1.5, there was logic behind that. We used qualitative and quantitative data. This was not some random selection. So I just want that to be on the record, that if you look at table 5, also they're using a rural conflict calculation. We're urban. So that's why I said it really should be considerably bigger, but that's not what we're looking for. So urban at 40 miles an hour is considerably bigger than the rural, but I won't quibble over that. So I'll leave it at that. But if somebody can answer if this is if there has been a petition filed or a grievance about this issue, otherwise I think you have to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment before we close that and move on? A motion would be in order to close the public comment.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Brian, support by Phil. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We did have one item addressed there. I am not an expert on the noticing rules. I tend to rely on staff for that. Joe, I know you didn't have that conversation directly with Josh. Any clarity that you can add?
I could just add that what Commissioner Marin had said makes complete sense. If we did not notice every section that's going to be impacted, that is a requirement. To date, staff has not received any petition against this ordinance. It's been more of a technical issue that we're facing right now.
Due process violation if we don't include the sections that are going to be amended through the proper public noticing requirements through the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act.
Or that's worst case scenario, but the other thing would be we would be creating conflicts in our zoning ordinance where only 1 or 2 sections would be amended and not the others. And so realistically, any sign would have to go to the ZBA in order to have those conflicts worked through. So regardless, waiting 1 more month will actually save us time to make sure it's not.
Hopefully that answers that question.
Motion to adjourn.
So move.
We have a
Whoa,
motion by
support.
Michelle,
Oh,
second by Brian. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Okay, one other thing, since somebody beat the gun. As you know, I was concerned about whether or not I was gonna be able to remain on the board
Uh-huh.
because of my my job schedule.
Yeah.
So luckily, worst case scenario, I will be late as opposed to being absent.
We'll take late fill over absent fill. I appreciate the
I
update.
thought so, so, but I just thought I'd mention that because that's the reason I was actually said I was going to be late, but I happen to have a process coach that was amenable of getting me out of there early. So that's why I was on time.
We had ayes. We haven't had anybody oppose.
One thing I think.
We'll take a
on.
late Commissioner Holyfield any day.
Thanks, Michael. Meeting adjourned.
Take care, all.
All right.